Hello and welcome to another episode of PodcastDX, the show that brings you interviews with people just like you, whose lives were forever changed by a medical diagnosis. I'm Lita.
And I'm Ron.
And I'm Jean Marie.
Collectively, we're the hosts of PodcastDX. On today's show, we're happy to be talking again with Kristine Hoestermann. Kristine is the host of the Because We Are Strong podcast and the founder of FindYourRare. She's joining us today to talk about being misdiagnosed with a medical condition. Hello, Kristine.
Hi, Kristine.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be back with you. I mean, I didn't think I'd be back under these circumstances, but here we are. This rare disease life never phases to amaze me.
Post-COVID.
Post-COVID and new diagnosis.
Yes.
Well, I guess we should start off by what symptoms, Kristine, first led you to seek out medical care?
Well, as you guys know, from, last time we chatted, the fatigue, the joint pain, the brain fog, all those things, and that led to my Ehlers Danlos diagnosis, my small fiber neuropathy diagnosis, POTS, and kind of the trifecta, mast cell, endo, kind of just throwing it all at me. And, I was seeing progression in that. And we were speaking off air a little bit, dental crowding, and I thought I was going crazy, to be honest, because I wanted glasses and braces so darn bad when I was a kid. Yes, I was that weirdo that just wanted that so bad. And now I'm looking at my teeth and I'm like, did my mom just miss it? Or did the dentist just not think I needed braces? You're crazy. And I can see all this changing in my mouth and super self-conscious, obviously. And my eyes have been super sensitive, but ultimately all my symptoms have been the same. It just felt like they were progressing.
Okay.
And in this, as we kind of have been transitioning out of COVID, my mother-in-law is a doctor, as I said, and she's been working with my medical team to see when was the best time for me to get vaccinated. If there was a time, they were really worried about vaccinating me. So I've been kind of just in quarantine. And my mother was I just want to know what genetically about your Ehlers Danlos. I just want, and so we had to fight really hard to get that testing done. And so I finally found a geneticist who was willing to take on my case and genetically test me.
Okay. So it wasn't the symptoms so much, but the genetic testing that led you to her diagnosis?
Well, so yeah. Basically none of my symptoms have changed, or they've just really progressed. And through COVID, it was super easy to stay stagnant, I think, because the world was stagnant.
Oh yeah.
It was easy to just everything became accessible to me and in a different way. I'm probably one of the rare people who really, of course, COVID stopped, and I don't wish it had to happen, but I also think it gave access to things like napping in the middle of the day, but still doing a phenomenal job at my job. And things of that nature. And as we kind of started rolling out of COVID, I felt the pressure came again to figure it all out, figure out why I'm getting worse, figure out why nothing's working, pressure from the outside, my mom and my family wanting me to get better, because all of a sudden, right, everyone can do all these things. So it wasn't I was again the oddball, if that makes sense.
So what was the actual misdiagnosis then?
So I get this geneticist. She's wonderful. She spends, honestly, God bless her soul, she's the first doctor who wanted to know from beginning to end, not the highlight reel, but every step of the way. And teletherapy this is, because this is still the I'd say we're in April maybe, so just a few short months after we talked. And at the end of all of that, she goes, I have some concerns in thinking that this may not be Ehlers Danlos Syndrome. And mind you, I never really have identified, you guys know, identify with like the word rare as opposed to a specific syndrome because my journey's been so long.
Right.
And so I feel like off the beaten path that, you know, it just didn't feel like that. So she does the, you know, the clinical test for it over like telehealth.
Right.
Brain fog. Right. Telehealth. And, you know, she's like, you don't meet the standards. I can't think of it. I'm sure you two know the name.
The Brighton scale?
Yes, the Brighton scale. So I fall point short based on like what she can see over telemedicine. Right. But mind you, I'm doing splits after not moving for a few years. You know, I've got like the thumb, the dental crowding, but I still fall short on this Brighton scale.
Okay.
So she's like, I can't give you a diagnosis for Ed's hypermobile.
Okay.
And so mind you, like, I'm trying not to let my world come crashing down, despite the fact that like, I thought my neurologist really did a very, like flase da, if you will, or like quick Brighton scale test and like kind of just like threw it on my chart, which is why I think I never really died. Like, it was something to hang on to, but it wasn't also the end all be all for me. But I could feel it. I could feel that wash over me of like, you're taking away something from me. Like
because
the thing that I didn't even really truly, know if I identified with, it still felt like, oh my God, like I can't believe you're doing this.
Right. Well, because you want to know what it is, because it's the name it, then tame it thing. And if you can't name it, how do you tame it? How do you treat it? Sure. Yes.
And I knew we weren't managing my Ehlers Danlos so well, but like there was also, you know, factors like, you know, Corona, I got approved for IVIG and then I started retaining water. Like there was I don't know what I thought. And I never would have, if you would have said this would have like washed over me the way it did in that appointment, I would have been like, you know, you're crazy. I don't identify that much with Ehlers Danlos. But it is, I identify in the quick sense of what do you have, like Ehlers Danlos.
Right.
That felt better than whatever she was about to do. And so she's like, I cannot do this. And because she had spent so much time with me, as opposed to the doctor who did give me the first Brighton scale, I felt like this, like, you know, like this second opinion kind of thing resonated more with me. Luckily, she wanted to genetic test me for all the connective tissue diseases genetic that were known. So that was a positive. And so we did that. And then the results come in and she's like, I want to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And so she was like, none of your genes have the Ehlers Danlos. The ones we know, there's no Ehlers Danlos.
Okay.
But there is a genetic mutation. And, you know, mind you, I'm scanning this report as fast as I can because another time where I didn't think seeing something on that paper was going to, so I wanted, holy crap, I have wanted something to be on a paper, you know? But as it's Rolodexing in my mind, you really never know how you're going to take it in. And at that moment, I was like, it wasn't panic. It was just, again, uncertainty. And so Z whatever, you know, has this mutation and that's known to be associated with Brittle Cornea Syndrome.
Oh.
Okay. And mind you, so I just hear cornea, right? And I'm just thinking like my eyes. Oh my gosh, my eyes.
Right.
A place in which, yes, they cause me a lot of trouble. I need, you know, glasses, super sensitive to light, all these things. Like I have problems with my eyes, but like to me, those were like more normal. I hate saying that word, but like they were nothing to do with this disease. Like some people have bad eyes and are sensitive to sun. And I knew that some of these diagnoses had to do with that. And so like my head starts like spinning. I feel like I don't even really hear what she's saying next because I'm now just trying to get to the part of the report where it like tells me something else. You know, the next thing I remember hearing her say was that I don't think this is what's causing your entire like disease.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a variant, just like I think since the last time we talked, I also found out that I have the BRCA gene. And that was more done because of our family's history with cancer.
Okay.
My aunt just recently has gotten cancer, and so, you know, my mom was like starting to get really on me about getting it.
Right.
I don't know why. I always just knew I had it since my mom got tested. We're like a spitting image of each other, and I just kind of knew.
Right.
But you know, another like kind of factor in this is like, so I got this, like, you know, layer I have to deal with, but not at this point. Like, you know, I've got doctors telling me they want me to be super preventative. I've got family telling me to wait it out. Who knows? So I kind of tabled that, but now I got this new thing in front of me with my eyes, and then she tells me that this is not what she thinks is causing it, and then I'm just like, I want to just throw my head through like the wall, because
it probably felt like you were starting all over again.
Well, it's just yet again another piece that isn't the piece.
Right, it's unknown.
So like, I had a positive tilt table test. I had a positive small fiber neuropathy test. I've got the BRCA gene, and I've got this new gene.
Mm-hmm.
None of which, though, is explaining to me something that they can like an answer. Like, they're all telling me that these are just.
So like the
let me just stop you right there, though.
Yeah.
There is. Hold on. There's an airplane.
There is an airplane. We live at an airport, which is unusual.
At an airport.
Yeah.
Well, at an air park. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a runway across the street.
Okay.
Bad choice for a podcast studio.
Right.
The pilots are walking through the studio right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So
hey, it may be good if you ever want to fly away.
right.
Oh, yeah.
There is no definitive genetic test as of now for hypermobile Ehlers Danlos.
Yes, correct.
So,
on top of
and just because one doctor says that you're a point away on the Brighton scale, so what?
But
well, yes, and right. So like, of course, then I do some research. Then I'm super confused, right? Because now I'm doing research. I'm getting back into the community, and all I see is that there's links to this to Ehlers Danlos.
right.
So, and like, the geneticist was very clear that, like, you know, if she saw me in person, this could have changed it. That the Brighton scale is not the best tool for Ehlers Danlos. We don't know. I mean, I know that people have been kind of saying they think they're closer to finding a genetic mutation, whatever have you. But like, you know, ultimately, where we were at, like, that's what her tele-assessment was, that,
Yeah.
you know, she could not give that clinical diagnosis.
Sure.
Which
Yeah. That's kind of.
But then I got even more confused.
Yeah.
Because the fact that I'm looking up brittle cornea disease, and I'm seeing that it's a connective tissue disease that can be like the first thing on Google says the links to Ehlers Danlos, and now I'm just like,
duh.
well, what the action? Am I the only one Googling here?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and now I'm just frustrated, right?
Yeah. I feel you.
What does anyone want me to do with this information when you're constantly like, everything's linked but nothing's linked, and I don't know.
Right. Well, now I'm going to ask you, I was going to ask you about a second opinion, but what about a third opinion?
So part of the reason, as we were talking about, like, that move I'm making, part of the reason is my mother-in-law, she works at the University of Rochester. She's the director of palliative care there. And so she is we're moving up here to, I'm here in Rochester now, but we're moving up to like the Lake Ontario area so that I can build a medical team around her.
Okay.
So that she can kind of champion the team.
Sure.
And also just, you know, make, like, you know, get appointments more than 6 months in advance, like, you know, see maybe some more specialized doctors in this type of stuff. So a third opinion is in the works, but ultimately, like, I'm left again with this sinking feeling. So then of course I happen to go to the optometrist because, you know,
they have a neuro-ophthalmologist that you might want to see.
A what?
Neuro-ophthalmologist. Well,
yes, and that's, well, so that is actually part of my new team up here.
Good.
But naturally, my coping skill the next day was to go to Warbury Parker and, treat myself to new snacks, because like that was how I decided that I was going to cope with whatever these scary things on the internet were telling me. And of course, my eyes, like I was out of date with my prescription
right.
of glasses.
Okay.
And so this, I have to give it credit. This ophthalmologist like read the report and did such a phenomenal job. Like for a walk-in kind of situation of Warbury Parker, like shout out to her, because she has taken things more seriously than half of my medical team that I've built over the last 7 years. So, but so she gives me some relief in telling me that like my retinas look pretty good.
Oh, good.
But that my corneas are retaining water, which is why like I can put my glasses on and sometimes still
it's not
like
clear, right?
Not see.
Yeah.
Based on how much water they're retaining. And she's basically like, don't poke your eyes, don't like do anything with your eyes, because we have no way of seeing how healthy the connective tissue around the retina is. And so, of course, like don't go playing like balls that can like, like catch or something of that nature.
I was thinking,
funny story though.
What do you call
on the way home, my wife happened to be talking with her hands, and my glasses happened. I was like taking my glasses off to put my sunglasses on, whacked me in the eye, which was just like the comic relief of all of it though. Like everything was fine, but like just like kind of like that, of course we would just get this like news to like keep my eyes fragile, and she would be the one that whacked me. So we had fun with that. But another looming factor, just like how do you handle like not being able to see? And of course the next thing I did was like, I want to see the Northern Lights so bad. Like, and so like, of course now I put like flight trackers on the Northern Lights, and I've calmed down since then, but ultimately, like, again, it's like when we genetic test, in utero, like sometimes information is just information, and that's hard too.
No, I don't know. I don't think there's ever enough information.
But it can't. I think you also go through the grieving process when you get information, and also, like you were saying, when they take a diagnosis away from you, you're going to grieve that as well, and that's a lot to take on at the same time.
Well, it's a process. It's a processing.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not linear, which like sucks, right? Like it's not linear. I feel like
you know what I consider it, and I do you fish?
I do not fish, but
okay.
We go from planes to
I know
fishing.
We're going to use a fish analogy.
When you go fishing, if you don't, depending on the spool, if you don't keep your thumb on the spool, it's
unravel.
called bird's nest. It can all unravel in a ball, and then it's kind of like
Christmas lights.
Yes, Christmas lights that are all tangled up, and you can't. How many analogies
I just want to let you know, like, I can't wait till after this podcast. My father-in-law fishes. Okay. I am going to go make him take me on the dock and explain this.
So anyway, I think that the information and our illnesses and our diagnoses all are like this big spider web tangle of information and symptoms that if you trace each one, you might get to an answer, but it's a very tangled mess.
Yes.
Right.
And everyone's sitting here telling you to live your life, right? Like everyone's sitting here telling you to go for the quest of answers and live your life. I'm sorry, those two things don't go together. Like it is a full-time emotional, physical, and mental job to go down the road of answers. And like it does not really align very well with living. And that's hard, right? It's hard to explain to people, because then it's like, well, you're not fighting. And it's like, no, I'm just not in search of something that I know is not potentially an answer. Like, for instance, I don't feel like I've gained anything from knowing about this brittle eye disease. Now I'm more confused, because she's saying no Ehlers Danlos. Google is saying this, I think has an attachment to it. And I'm not talking about like just any Google article. I'm talking about, like some sort of scholarly, thing saying that there's links to Ehlers Danlos. And now I'm just sitting here like, well, where do you go next?
Mm-hmm. Well, doctors are human. Doctors can make errors.
And it can be just, it's a lot. It is a tangled mess, and it's hard to work out. And you have to be the one that really oversees everything, but it's good to know that your mother-in-law is also taking an active role in that, and it sounds like she's going to be a great asset for you as well.
Yeah, and actually, can I give you guys like your listeners a like new thing I found that I think is so helpful? They're this brand new company. It was I don't know how they started it. They're very young. It's called Consolidoc. So it's basically just a monthly prescription of $10, and they will go and get all of your medical records for you. I timed it, no joke, took me less than 30 seconds to sign up for the whole account and less than 10 seconds to request each one of my documents. And now I just have, and you can constantly keep up with it, or you can shut it down, whatever you choose. But it has been life-saving in this instance for me when I'm like, I never knew I was going to be sick forever. So like I wasn't getting all my records as I went. This isn't something I was born with that like I have track of. So to just be able to punch in John Hopkins and have them go out into the world and make that phone call, not pay that fee because it's included in my monthly thing, it has been, honestly, it's been allowed me to further advance my health journey.
It can help with when a doctor asks, so where did you have that test? And you're like, I don't know.
When did you have that test?
I don't know. I've been to, and they're like, well, which hospital? And you're like, no, I've been to 12 different hospitals on both coasts.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's a good company.
Yeah, that sounds.
I would worry about my information getting hacked, but
and also with COVID, it's hard to go and get your records because a lot of records departments are actually closed.
Right. So it's got goods, it's bads.
Yeah, but that
it's definitely a resource to look into if you're someone who hasn't tracked your for me, I wasn't tracking my medical because I never thought I could wake up sick and never get better. It never occurred.
Right. And or like I just had to have my annual checks. And they said, well, where was your last scan done? And my mom and I just looked at each other and I'm like, I don't know. Do you know how many different states I've been in the past 3 years? I have no idea where it was done. And they're like, well, which doctor? And I just wanted to laugh. I'm like, oh.
I have, my doctor's list on my phone is probably 2 pages long.
Right. I have no idea. So that does sound very helpful. And when you were talking about trying to balance things out, I am curious, how have you been able to find a work-life balance during the whole coronavirus lockdown pandemic thing, especially since a lot of your work is done from home?
Well, I'm actually, so Rare is something I can't wait till it can be its own. I can actually do Rare full time, but like any business, you need capital, right? You need capital to start. And so I work for DCPS public schools. So I actually, for me personally, I had hit so February before Corona, I just hit an absolute mental breakdown. No one was accommodating me. No one was really allowing me to sit when I needed to sit or not do the things that were like in my accommodations. And it got to the point where I was pushed towards leave. And so then a month later, Corona hits and I'm on leave. So that was a thing. But I then decided that I was going to go back because we were going to do virtual. And I was like, I think I can do virtual. And I had a phenomenal year. I had such an amazing year because what happened is I had my schedule and I could, if I didn't have anything until, 8:30 when work started, I could wake up at 8:20, look presentable, be on screen when I need to be on screen. I met all the specifications without all the extra moving and commuting. And for my body, that was amazing. And so, this year, I used to work all week because I'd have to leave the house by 7, and I wouldn't get back from DC traffic until around, let's say, I got out at 3:30, wouldn't get out until, I wouldn't get back, let's say, between 4:30 and 5.
Oh.
And that's like stop and go traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd be done for the rest of the night.
Oh, yeah.
Run my own small business, running myself into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd, on the weekend, just not be a human.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my life. And then Corona happened, and I could wake up at 7, and I was like I've been journaling every morning, and, I've been able to, stay up till 10 and go to sleep at 10 because I didn't have to work until 4 a.m. to try to get my small business up and running, because I knew the weekend I would just be dead. So for me, it was great. Funny part is, though, transitioning world back.
Right.
All of a sudden, my place of employment starts to get a little weird about the coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I start to get like these really weird messages, like saying I wasn't meeting expectations, that I was at meetings that I was late to meetings that I was not. And all of a sudden I saw this pattern happening again of where they didn't want to accommodate somebody, and like
working remotely.
Then I had to make a decision, and like I ultimately decided to leave because I couldn't do this again. I couldn't push myself to the mental breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't allow me to go back with a virtual position. And so that saddens me, because I think it's been shown that we all could, even 3 days remote, work with us. Like we want to work with us.
Right.
And so it's been a really kind of sad period of time, to be honest.
Not to, add anything more to this, but I would think that would be covered under the ADA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, that's why it's a thing. And here's the other thing is I now have to decide what fight I'm going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said I don't want to put more on your plate.
And yes, you're 100% right. I have all the evidence I need to file grievances, to go through this process. But when you're given 12 spoons a day and you never know when you're getting them back,
right.
It is a horrible feeling to have to choose between basically walking away and knowing that that's an injustice, and trying to find something like remote now, which I have, thankfully. Or, like I said, I don't want to use my spoons fighting a system that already we know is not, and I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. How does anything change? Which is awful.
Sure.
Yeah, I know we've spoken with a student who kept lobbying for remote learning because she has hyperacusis.
Acusis, yeah.
Yeah, and so she needs quiet, and they said it's not possible. We can't do it. And then COVID, and everyone's doing it. Mm-hmm. And then she wanted to continue doing it for her. It worked out really well for her. And they were like, "Oh no!" And it's like, well, it's a fantastic option for individuals who need who it works better for, and it kind of opened up possibilities. And I'm glad that she had a really good school year because of it.
Right.
It's just like you said, post-pandemic now, we can't just go back.
Right.
And we can't allow it to just happen. Like we saw the whole world go remote. We saw we can do it, and now's our time as a whole community to advocate for that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Right. Kristine, how have you maintained friendships during the COVID lockdown?
I think my friendships have gotten stronger.
Nice.
Because no one wants to FaceTime when I can't text because my fingers hurt too bad.
Okay.
In their busy lives.
Right.
No one wants to Zoom or, have a virtual movie night when they would rather go to the bars. And so I feel like my relationships have gotten actually stronger because all of a sudden this thing that I needed to participate was now available to me. I'm more worried about the post-COVID,
reverting back to the old ways.
Reverting back to our old ways, because in a lot of ways it does feel like COVID happened, we're going back to so many old patterns. that I worry that, we're going to forget that there was another way to do it, I guess.
Okay.
It's 11 o'clock.
Okay.
That's just my computer because
It's reminding you.
very helpful. His name is Fred.
Hi,
Fred.
Both Lee
Hello,
and Jean
Fred.
Marie looked at me when they heard that voice. They're like, what are you saying?
It's 11 o'clock.
It's like, thanks, Ron.
Okay.
Well, Kristine, I have a question. How did the pandemic? You did mention that you were using telehealth, but how else has the pandemic changed the way you receive your health care?
That's a great question. Sorry.
No.
My wife likes to, when I'm recording or doing anything telehealth, she thinks that like I can read into two things. I'm like, girl, I can barely do one thing. But in a lot of ways, it made it accessible.
Okay.
But in a lot of ways, I think my healthcare has suffered. Like my team that existed suffered.
Okay.
I suffered with them. However, anyone new who was offering telehealth and like wasn't like the genetics doctor, I would have never gotten to see her. My therapist, like not having to waste spoons on seeing my therapist and my psychiatrist, like those things have been wonderful. But my neurologist, she works at NYP in New York Presbyterian, and like I saw significantly less of her because of demands she had elsewhere. Okay. And interestingly enough, I fought for 4 years to get IVIG, and in the smack in the middle of the pandemic, September, I get a letter stating that like I like my insurance now approved it, and I don't know how much that had or had not to do with the pandemic. The only thing that has changed was the pandemic. Like no more doctors had submitted information, no more, like we had kind of just given up this fight. And I thought it was an interesting thing that as an immunocompromised person, they were bringing me into the hospital at the height of the pandemic. So that was, for me, just like an interesting side note, like, I hate to think insurance plays games, but like the more cynical side of me was like, what was that? Like, why are they approving this now?
Right. I know we had to pay for video visits prior to the pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, they were like, we're offering free video visits. And it's like, well, we've been paying out of pocket for those because we couldn't, like if you're in the midst of a migraine or something's going on, you can't get to the doctor. And they were like, oh, yeah, well, sorry. Yeah. Now everyone gets them free. So, again, something we hope continues after everything opens back up. Because video visits.
Very scary that it could not. Like, that's to me the scariest part is that it could not happen. And it's since the beginning of the pandemic, one of the things I've been like kind of saying is like, we as a community, I know I was mad. I was mad at a lot of things that were happening at first. Like my job becoming all remote after legitimately 2 weeks before I had to step away because like they were pushing me to the bone. And now it was all remote. Like I was upset about a lot of things that were happening, but ultimately I was like, we need to use this rather than like a, now you see what we're going through thing into we need to make this continue thing because the pandemic will end and inevitably, just like everything, life will go on for most, but we will still, the quarantine doesn't end for everybody.
Right. Yeah, especially if you're immunocompromised, it's a continuation.
So, Kristine, can you tell our listeners, what adaptations do you use or have helped you both at work and at home?
He missed the whole intro with the house building, but that wasn't on tape either. So go ahead and tell our listeners what you had to go through.
Yeah, when I came in, all I heard was universal design.
Yeah.
This is such an interesting thing that you bring up. I'd say in terms of work, we kind of went over how good working remotely has been for me because of just the accessibility to being able to lay down. I didn't realize I always say I don't take naps, I take sleep. But I didn't realize that how able I was to, when I felt something, lay down, set my alarm, and for an hour later get up and do it when there's just literally no step. Like, you know what I mean? I did not realize, I always just thought that would like kill, like I would never wake up. But it turns out like those little breaks are so important to my health. The ability to have cold water all the time, the ability to have certain things that I can't have at work around me, that was just completely changing. And in terms of a home, we knew we had to move to Rochester. We knew we needed to be closer to family as I progressed. And like I said, my mother-in-law works at University of Rochester. And we then go to buy a home, and we all know how horrible the housing market is. So like, unfortunately, it's actually cheaper for us to build a home than it is for us to buy a home right now. Which I know sounds so crazy, but when people are going hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking prices, and they are, asking for $300,000 on a house value that we would need to still put in like $100,000 worth of work,
right?
Like the value is just better. And so we go to build, and they give us the standard layouts. And now that we're in the position we're in, we start to think about like, well, what if I'm in a wheelchair? What is really hard for me to do right now? Showering is one of the hardest, I'd say, hardest things to do in terms of energy. And cooking is another one. And so through that process, we've been able to really create this home that has been fully accessible, but it's also comes at a cost, right? Like, so for instance, the average size door, I think, is 4 inches smaller than what would be considered wheelchair accessible by code. A shower, our master shower was a rectangle, and that could not let a wheelchair in, or to turn, or to like back me in. We had to extend our shower. To have a bench, we had extended to 7 feet by 5 foot deep, so that we didn't have to have like a door or a hanger, so that like right now it's for my convenience to sit down and be able to reach anything. But gosh forbid, whatever happens in the future, like my wife has to be able to get in there as well.
Right.
And right now, like when I struggle on days, it's like, it's nearly impossible. And so we had to think of all these things. And like I was saying to you guys before, I hope we get to a point where the standard house comes that way.
Right.
It comes because it doesn't have, it does nothing bad to anybody who doesn't need it, but it is life-changing for those of us who do.
Right.
Actually, in my job, I work right now with getting my students housing out in the community. And I'm still working with a student right now who's a wheelchair user. And the difference between the quote-unquote accessible and the standard units, I mean, it's night and day. So to hear you talk, I mean, you're ringing a chord, because I see this on a daily basis. And you have to ask for accessibility, or I think earlier you mentioned universal design, whereas if something were built that way, it would be good for anybody at any time.
Right. And even in recreation and things of that nature and travel, like hotel rooms, if they have universal design, it makes life easier for everyone, but it also makes it accessible to people who otherwise, couldn't travel. And it's just nice to take that into account. Even universal design for like mascara wands, instead it's easier for everyone to use if they make it like a hexagon, or it has an extra holder for, so if your hand shakes, it makes it easier for everyone to use.
Honest to God, even...
Yeah, when you use mascara, don't you find that?
I was going to say, I haven't run into that yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
But even the faucets or the door handles, and honestly, if you drink coffee, they actually make the containers so that people that have difficulties with their hands are able to open them up. Again, and it's simple stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's
But-
not.
Just thinking about it differently and coming up with a design adaptation, and it makes it
The
useful.
part that like for me is so frustrating though is that like there are small places and like so Rare has made a patent, like we patented a sweatshirt, an accessible sweatshirt for treatment with portholes and IV access. But I don't have the capital to, so like that one project for 100 of them, right, was a $5,000 investment for me.
Ooh.
And so I'm all in, don't get me wrong, but like we need people who have the capital to invest in these things to make them affordable, because I have to charge so much for my sweatshirt because like I need to try to make that money back, that then it becomes again inaccessible.
Right.
And so we need to get people on these design teams who are just kind of looking for those things. You mentioned travel, and this is a whole nother episode, I'm sure, but just like the wheelchair, how many wheelchairs are broken during airplane travel? Like that's a huge hot button topic right now. And
I know mine has been. Yeah.
So, and like it's, you know, it's unfortunate that like, you know, it has to take, you know, a video going viral for people to like see and think about these things and not even necessarily make the changes, just to see and recognize.
Right. Although we definitely advocate for changes.
We're actually, we already taped the episode. I don't know when it's going to publish,
travel,
but we interviewed a lady that lives in Canada about travel. Accessibility.
And she worked with, and now I can't think of what it's called. Sorry, strong aphasia day.
Okay.
Lonely Planet on their accessible travel segment, and they have an extensive booklet about how to make accessible or travel more accessible for everyone, which is fantastic.
Right.
You know.
I actually have like one last thing on this accessibility thing that drives me nuts is, I don't know if any of you guys use Bitmoji, but if Bitmoji is out there listening, I have a real gripe with this. Bitmoji, being in a wheelchair should not be an option that any person can just pick. It like so if you make a Bitmoji, it's like an avatar, right?
Right.
That you can use text.
Right.
And you can't choose to be in a wheelchair when you're making your character. But you know, if you scroll to like the most recent, you'll see that like you could put your person in a wheelchair with select designs. But anybody can, like, it's not an option to choose. It's just like, you know, they put you in like all these different things. And one of them is a wheelchair. Bitmoji, if you are listening, that is a problem.
Okay.
That is a huge problem, in my opinion, of what we're saying. No one, like, I think it's incredibly disrespectful, and you can't choose to be in a wheelchair in all of the options, right? You can only choose to be in it as like a pre-selected, me, Lydia, like all of us could be in a wheelchair, as opposed to like making it like just like they do hairstyles. So Bitmoji, I'm sure you're not listening, but if you are,
they are, because today's World Emoji Day.
Okay, but this
shut up, really?
It is.
It is, but we're not posting this on World Emoji Day.
No, but that's okay.
Okay, but it's Bitmoji. I will write to them that this episode is going to air, and I would like them to listen to it because.
All right.
And you're obviously a millennial, because we're all looking at each other like, what?
Oh no, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, I don't, but that's.
I use a lot of emojis.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Kristine, over the past year or so, what role has self-care taken in your daily routine?
I think it's funny because usually I would say it has no space. I'm sure I said this in our first episode, has no space because, you know, I'm trying to run a small business and make that my full-time career and blah, blah, blah. But like I said, in the last year, because work has been accessible to me, I've been able to get in an hour early every day to journal. And that has been phenomenal for me. Also, I've put because I've had more energy, I've had more time to spend with my family, like my wife and my dog, and go on walk with my dog and my wife and eat with them, as opposed to being so dead tired that I get everything in the bed.
Okay.
So,
well, yeah,
I would say that's been like huge.
That's fantastic.
Good.
And I think that
I've been able to
answers
incorporate
Ron's
self
question.
care.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yep. And Kristine, what's next for you and your company?
Oof, that is a great question. I feel like I've been in a bit of a funk lately.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to find my footing again post new diagnosis, I think.
Okay.
And so that's a big one. And, you know, next for Rare is we have a lot of things in works we have a lot of new tech packs for different types of accessible bags, for tubies, of accessible night shirts for when you're in the hospital. So we have a lot of tech packs in the work that we're hoping to, you know, find some funding for.
Okay.
But ultimately just, you know, continuing to hit the ground with this, bringing the visible vision, the idea that, you know, together working, like, you know, one by one we stand together, and
Right.
We're not so invisible.
Okay. So maybe some collabs. I think it's called a collab, where like it's a collaboration.
Like collaboration?
Right, but it's shortened.
Yeah, there's definitely some collaborations in the work. I don't know if you guys have heard of like Hot Girl Summer. But it's like this big fad, like when COVID opened up.
Right.
Yes, I'm a millennial, Hot Girl Summer, whatever. And like, I obviously did not prescribe to that. But I collabed with an artist, and we did Sick Girl Summer, and we have like a whole collection about that. And I mean, it's just as silly as Hot Girl Summer, but ultimately, like, it's just the idea that we're still here and we're still able to participate.
Right. Well, that's fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Excellent.
well, Kristine, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate your time. How can our listeners find out more about you?
So you guys can find me at FindYourRare on all social platforms,
Okay.
as well as you can info at FindYourRare, anything at FindYourRare. And that is you'll always find me at that place. And please, I welcome anybody who is, you know, struggling with anything, to go on and drop in there. You're welcome. Come as you are.
Great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
And we really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that we BS'd or that we chatted so long that we can't do our game show.
Right.
But next time we'll do the run through our new segment, our game show segment.
Right. I don't want to run out of time on the Zoom meeting and then we cut her short.
Right. But thank you so much for joining us again. It was exciting to hear from you and to hear everything that's going on. And we look forward to hearing more about your house build.
Right.
Oh, yes. Thank you, guys. I think you guys gave me a new idea. I should have put that in my thing.
Well, we're going to definitely be sending you some links, and we look forward to collaborating with you on our book.
Yes. That sounds like fun.
If our listeners have any questions related to today's show, they can contact us at PodcastDX@yahoo.com, through our website, PodcastDX.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or Instagram.
And if you have a moment to spare, please give us a review wherever you get your podcast. And as always, please keep in mind that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment, and before undertaking a new healthcare regime, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast.
Till next week.